at the end of those 2 months, like suddenly my paycheck didn't arrive. I got my first like interview with Google, and I was like really like thrown back to earth, like get back to reality, like you're not that good, like you're not up for this job yet. Like I really messed up. And I realized that it was an offer for a software engineer. So this is an SDE1. And I had like all these many years of experience. Like I had almost like 6 years
Yeah.
there. And I thought, hey, why am I not getting like a senior offer? Like really hard to communicate in not my native language, so in a second language. So that
Okay,
was
so this was the first time when you worked in a completely English environment. Hey, this is Jorge with the Pragmatic Engineer. Talking with Jorge, who is a software engineer at Microsoft before he was at Amazon, before he was at Intel. You might think this is a typical success story. It's not. Jorge had a pretty bumpy road into getting into these companies. He got an SD1 offer at Amazon when he had 6 years of experience. And yet he's very happy on where he is and where he's going. I was really happy to have this conversation because Jorge reminds me not only of myself, but of a lot of people who got into big tech by taking one step at a time, starting at a small local company in a country that maybe doesn't even speak English, and working their way one step at a time until finally getting into one of these companies. Jorge didn't have the advantage of going to college from where big tech companies recruit straight out of. He doesn't even have the advantage of speaking English as a native language. And yet, he got into some of these places. Let's listen to his story on how he got here, and we'll also cover what his day-to-day at Microsoft looks like. This is part one of a two-part series conversation, and in the second part, I'm going to be talking with Jorge on his channel on my advice on how to get to that senior level from this mid-level that he's currently at the likes of Amazon, Microsoft, Uber, and other big tech companies. Let's jump in. Before we jump into talking about what it's like to join a big tech company, I just wanted to do a rapid fire of questions. So first one, when was the last time that you were on call, and how many times did you get woken up?
That would be about 2 weeks ago, I think, in May, like in mid-May. And I got woken up 3 times. It's part of the job, right? But sometimes, I think it depends, because you could have a good uncle and you might not get like woken up at all, which has happened in the past, but you could have a really bad one. I think this was a good uncle, honestly.
Yeah, and the big question is like, were they real alerts or was it just noise?
I think it was just noise. Sometimes, part of being on call is tuning or figuring out like how the alerts should be like set properly.
I'm fully with you. It's kind of annoying when that happens, but hey, you need to tweak the alerts afterwards. So what was your first ever programming language that you learned?
Visual Basic 6. So I learned that like in college, like, like for whatever the course duration was, like less than, like 4 months. Then I switched over, I believe it was like PHP. Back then, we mostly did like websites, like web pages. That was like the first thing, like JavaScript, PHP. So it was kind of a mix like that. JavaScript, PHP, HTML, CSS mix.
And the final one is, what is the most important non-coding related skill that you think helped your career?
It's the skills that are around like whatever has to do with communication, like conveying ideas, like people understanding what you want to say. So I come from Latin America. So I was born in Colombia, lived in Mexico. I had my professional career starting in Mexico. At least in Mexico, there's a lot of companies that work with US based companies. So we have to learn English as well. So that was really important for me. If I wouldn't have learned English, I don't know if that's like a soft skill, but I mean, if I hadn't learned that, then I couldn't be like talking to you right now, right? So I guess that's one.
And I guess it's a good question. If you don't learn English, could you work at an international company? And as a software engineer, I have a feeling, except for a few exceptions, maybe in countries where you don't need it, let's say China, but for the most part, the answer might be no. So. I'm totally with you, because I'm also not a native. I'm also from Hungary, and like English to me seems to be almost the most important language in software engineering, at least when you want to work on bigger stuff. But yeah, it's a really important one. Can you tell us about your career path, like how you started from? You mentioned you're originally from Mexico, but when people look at where you worked the past couple of years, has been Amazon and Microsoft. How did you start, and how did you get to where you are right now? You're in the US working at pretty cool companies on pretty big projects.
Well, I think it was kind of an interesting story, and I think there might be like some contrast to whatever like other people's stories might be. I just started back in 2012, my first job
Mhm.
in a small company. So this was a company in based in Mexico City. I was there for 3 years, and those 3 years until 2015, I worked at small companies, startups, medium companies that basically did like outsourcing kind of work
Mhm.
for bigger companies in Mexico. But the market was pretty local. The first company I worked for, it only had clients in Mexico City, but the companies we worked for, that bigger company had operations all over the country.
Mhm.
Then when I moved to a startup, I basically worked for this company that had only like local clients. I used to work like with websites, mobile apps, but the job was more like, okay, this is the job, just do it, and I
Mhm.
will go ahead and do whatever they ask me for. It's interesting because I was growing in my technical skills, and like I heard that, okay, you're like our most senior engineer here. Like, yeah, come to this meeting with us, and we can meet the client, and then yeah, this is the guy that's doing our application and whatever, and this is our team, and I had like some growth there, and I felt really overconfident. I'd say I wouldn't feel
Mhm.
that way like right after this many years, but I felt like I could do anything, right? And
Well,
then
so basically, it sounded
yeah,
like you were the most senior person after a while, pretty much,
yeah.
right?
I actually worked for two startups in that period of time. Like one of them, I only worked like for 2 months, and it was an experience where, okay, come join our startup. I was like the only developer, and at the end of those 2 months, like suddenly my paycheck didn't arrive, and it's like, oh, you know what? Like we ran out of money. You're out.
Oh,
We're
you
sorry.
you got the proper startup experience. Oh.
Yeah, it was a proper startup experience. So yeah, kind of an interesting experience. Those first 3 years. Then I decided, okay, I wanted to try like something more bigger in terms of the companies I wanted to work for. Still in Mexico, I wanted to try get jobs at the likes of Google, Facebook,
Mhm.
the kind of companies, right? Then I got my first like interview with Google, and I was like really like thrown back to earth, like get back to reality, like you're not that good, like you're not up for this job yet. Like I really messed up my first couple of interviews. I just figured out, okay, maybe I'm not as senior as I thought I was. I haven't developed like a lot of skills.
Mm.
So I kept trying, and then I eventually moved to Guadalajara in Mexico as well. I got
Mhm.
into my first big company, which was Intel, in
Oh,
Mexico. So
Intel, nice.
Yeah,
That's a big name.
that's a good name, and it really added a lot of like value to my resume. I think I joined as a like entry level engineer. I got promoted there, kind of a mid level. I never got like to senior level,
Mhm.
but I was learning a lot there. I stayed there until 2018, 2017, 2018. That's the time where I started interviewing again for the likes of like Google, Facebook, Amazon,
Mhm.
Microsoft. Like, so that's when I landed my first FANG offer at Amazon. To be honest with you, it was quite a shock when I first got the offer, because I got the offer like, hey, like you made it. And I realized that it was an offer for a software engineer. So this is an SDE one, and I had like all these many years of experience. So, like I had almost like 6 years
Yeah.
there, and I thought, hey, why I'm not getting like a senior offer? Like, well, why?
And you were also promoted at Intel, right? So you went from Intel, the new grad, to the mid level or whatever
Yeah,
level that
yeah,
is.
yeah, like to some like some mid level there, and I thought like, hey, why I'm not getting at least like an SD2 offer? Like, what is this?
Mhm.
And I talked to the recruiter, and I was explained what the responsibilities were. You're getting an offer that in other companies it might be considered senior. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll go with that. I'll just join it. I mean, I won't waste the opportunity, right?
Mhm.
So I took it.
And this was an
And
offer like was it in Mexico or was it in the US?
oh, that was for working in the US. So I actually moved from Mexico. I was in Guadalajara at the time, Mexico, and I moved to Seattle afterwards. So I arrived to Seattle that same year in 2018.
So were you there with already? So you worked at a different company or with Intel, or was Amazon giving you basically an offer to move to the US, or was this your first like US job?
I was working at Intel when I did the interviews and
Yeah.
when I got the offer. When I got the offer, I was like, okay, how can I get to the US? And then there comes like a complicated immigration process that is, I didn't know if I was going to be able to move
Yeah.
to the US because, you have to be accepted and this visa process.
Yeah, the visas are, it's a nightmare.
I thought, well, I will take the offer. If the visa comes through, then fine. If not, then I might have to turn it down. But I'll give it a try. And in the meantime, I left Intel and I went to work for another company. It was kind of like, okay, it's a nice place, and I'll be there. Like, if I don't get the visa, then I will be
Mm.
happy with this company.
Circling back, like as a hiring manager, like I've hired people at Uber. I had made offers for people with a few years of experience as an SD1. SD1 is a very interesting position because I think what a lot of people don't realize is the kind of most straightforward, like textbook way to get into any large company, FANG or not FANG or just well known is you go to university, you get an internship, you intern there, you get a return offer as a new grad, and boom, you get that new grad offer. Now, if you don't do this, the second easiest way to get into these companies is actually at the senior level when you're actually like senior, which sometimes means 10 years of experience if you've never worked at these companies. And the third place is the new grad or the SD1 level, which typically it's an awkward space, but people who've never worked at companies like this and have a few years of experience, they usually are not necessarily ready for SD2, not always. We did this at Uber as well. We would give a higher range on SD1, but we didn't hire them. And the reason we didn't do that is like you want to hire people who will be successful. So you don't want someone who will struggle as an SD2 or as a maybe, but if they rock it as an SD1, they should be able to get promoted really quickly. My expectation would be if they hired you as SD1 with 6 years, you probably should have been promoted pretty quickly afterwards to SD2, if things go right.
I think that wasn't going to be the case for me. I think it was going to be like a little bit longer than that. It's really interesting because I just struggle a lot, and I'll be honest with this. Like cultural shock was really a huge thing for me. Like it was like really really hard to communicate in not my native language, so in a second language. So that
Oh,
was
yes, this was the first time when you worked in a completely English environment where you
yeah.
didn't have anyone, from Mexico or any of the
Yeah,
Spanish.
yeah, like full time. I mean, we have had like customers back in Mexico that or
Mm,
partners or whatever and that we spoke English like during meetings, but then you only put the effort like for 2 hours a day tops, and that's like your
yeah,
maximum effort, and then your brain goes back into. For me, it was like Spanish, right? And it was like
yeah.
easier to have that, but then like here there was like full time, so no one really like spoke Spanish. So I got this
Mm,
mentor that spoke Spanish, and he helped me out a lot for me to understand what how to do my job responsibilities. But not only that, is that the technical challenge was also different from what I was used to. None of these companies I worked in the past were operating at a bigger scale,
yeah.
and not with the same rules on what like operational excellence should be like thinking about reliability, like things like that, scaling up, like all of that. It was new to me, so I really wasn't at that level, and I didn't realize that. I wonder if anyone you have interviewed like in this, like someone who might have come to Uber might have like seen the similar scenario like this, like maybe a lot of experience but not on big scale.
Yeah, so it is pretty common for people who have worked at agencies. So that's actually a really interesting hire that what I often made at Uber. And let's say this is for mobile engineering. So, at Uber, we build a large mobile app, and there for mobile engineers, there's tons of people who have worked with agencies for up to 10 years, and they built all these apps again and again and again, but they never built a large app with millions of users, and they haven't seen feature flags at scale or how to structure a code base where up to hundreds of people work together. In your case, you had 6 years of experience and you get an offer in SD1. They have 10 or 12 years and they get an offer in SD2, and they're really surprised because they never had a less than senior role. And then they come in, and a lot of them also have the same culture shock. I had a person on my team who was really overwhelmed. We had one-on-one in the morning, and he looked like he didn't sleep. I'm like, what happened? Like, you don't seem like you sleep. Like, oh, I was reading the code base at night. I'm like, what? It's like, well, every company I worked with, I knew the whole code base, so I want to read the Uber code base. And I was like, it's not gonna happen. It's a million lines. Like you, it's crazy. And so, but the crazy thing was like he had to drop a lot of his old habits. And for example, this person, he was telling me that in all his companies, the PMs would create Jira tickets, and that's how he would work, even as a senior. And I told him that's not how we work. It's you create your own tickets. I mean, you create your own work. Like you go out and tell me what we should be doing, if you want to operate, let's say, at the senior level. And it was interesting because this culture shock exists for people who have been outside of this bubble. I've been in this bubble for a long time, but I think it's really refreshing that you're talking about this, because I feel that a lot of people who are working at these companies just came in there from college, honestly. Like I knew a lot of people at Uber and at Facebook and at Google who have been there for college, and they talk about like this is just an everyday thing. It's not. It's very different. And
Yeah,
the language barrier, by the way, I've seen that as well. So I've had a person move in Amsterdam from Argentina, another person from Brazil. I saw the same thing with them. In fact, when I moved from Hungary to UK for the first time, I actually remember how tired I was every day just speaking English all the time. And it actually took me probably like 6 or 12 months to just, there was a point where I started to dream in English, and then I knew that I'm starting to get close to, getting used to it. I think we should talk about how it is much more difficult. Like, you had a huge handicap.
as you said, there's like a bubble. I have met like people as well that they come in from right from college. So I met like this SD1 back in Amazon. He had joined from college, and he's American, so his native language is English as well, and he's like like super smart. Like I would work with this guy. Like, who is this guy? Like, this guy's a genius. And even like for me, like looking at age, so I was like about 28 years old, and this guy is like 22 years old, and I see like this guy like performing really really well, and I'm like, I am an imposter here. Like, what's going on? Like,
Yeah,
and,
the famous imposter syndrome.
yeah, and we got that because then, and I think that's a mistake that I did. Like, I would compare myself to what other people were doing and what their career stage was, and at the beginning I wasn't focusing on my own like career stage and how this story looks like for me. And for many people, I have seen this as well. Like, some people has told me stories that, oh, I'm a senior, like over here, I have like these lots of years experience. They may just get an offer with a lower level, like non-senior level, and then they are like, no, I'm just gonna join it because I don't want that. If I want to join, I want to join a senior. And then it's like, okay, that's fine, but just make sure that you have the relevant experience, because then it's like the responsibilities are not even the same. It's like the role is not even the same when you make like this switch, just because of how big the products are. And we have kind of that opportunity, I guess. Companies like this, the impact that they have on the scale that they operate, is not something that you find everywhere. That's like a barrier that once you cross, then okay, I can see how I can adapt to this new environment. And I think that's why I ended up joining, and that's why I then left and joined Microsoft. When I left, one of the things, clearly a promotion, right? So I got to Microsoft SD2, but I felt I was kind of ready for the job, because I think that being this year and a half almost in Amazon gave me that perspective that I was lacking. I think this is correlated with what you said about being SD1 and then being promoted. I think it has to do with bringing whatever experience you have in the past. After you gain context on this new environment, you can adapt that and operate at a higher level. For me, definitely, I think it was going to be more into like 2 years, honestly, because of this shock I had when I first joined. Then when I adapted, okay, I can stay here or I can look for another project. And I decided, okay, let's go see what else is there. And
Yeah,
I thought,
honestly, like sometimes that is the right call to do, especially, like like I think everyone's career is unique, and I get people asking me sometimes of like, oh, do you think I should change job or do this? Like, I think you're the one who will see that the most with the most context. Sounds like you were totally ready for that change. In fact, you probably were ready for a while. So as a closing one on this one, I'd love to hear, what does your day-to-day look like? So you're now an SD2 at Microsoft, which is right under what Microsoft calls senior. The fellow engineer said, like, what do you do day-to-day? Is it like, are you coding all day? Are you in meetings all day? Like, can you talk about what a typical week would look like not just a day?
so my first year anniversary in Microsoft was this week, actually. So I'm like turning 1 year in Microsoft, like right,
Awesome.
like
Congrats.
in the past. Thanks. First 6 months, I would say that I was coding, or not coding necessarily, but at least reading the code base and figuring out like debugging, logging, that kind of stuff most of my day. So I would have days that I would mostly, like get some bug or some feature or some like something I had to do that actually requires a code change. Part of that is getting context on what the project is like. Like a project might be like too big to fully get context in a week or two. Like it's impossible. I'm still getting, after 1 year, I'm still like trying to understand like all the use cases and all the things that are related to the project I work at. But I
And
was
what
spending.
product are you working on, if it's not a secret?
Oh yeah, I work in an org called IC3. We do mostly like messaging backend services for Microsoft Teams. So I could say that I work for Microsoft Teams. I'm not part of the Teams org itself, but I am part
Mhm.
of the what you call M365. Yeah,
Awesome. So
that's
you make those messages happen.
yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's a pretty cool project. It's a pretty high impact project, so it's really fun. As I was saying, like it's interesting because at first I would do this more often, and now I have ramped up in a lot of ways. Like let's say, like someday I have something that I have to do. I have to go and code, right? I am figuring out I have less and less time to code. I would maybe start my day by, I have like a to-do list, like, okay, what do I have to do? Like talk to this person, talk to this person, talk to this person,
Mhm.
rearrange this. Then, maybe, 2 hours to code what I have to code, review other people PRs. So it's a mix of all of this, but I am noticing that I am coding less and less as I'm looking forward to become senior eventually. So there's this set of skills that I have to develop. As you said, like the work, right? Like you do your own work. I guess I'm kind of learning that. It's something I'm looking forward to. I still have to improve there, but I'm starting to like shift, I suppose. It's
Awesome.
weird.
And yeah, and then on that note of the road to senior, head over to Jorge's channel to see the second part of this conversation where we're going to be talking about the road to senior, both how you're working towards it and also some of my observations. So thanks very much. Don't forget to head over and subscribe to his channel as well, and catch you later.
Thanks. See you there.